Welcome back to This is VANCOLOUR. Since it's all about the animals in BC tonight, we have to talk about the killer whale. Recently voted BC's best provincial symbol, it's on the Canucks logo, and it's even digitized beside the Olympic cauldron at Jack Pool Plaza in Vancouver. But the already endangered southern resident orcas are in trouble. The Centre for Whale Research reports their population grew by just one whale last year. 4 calves survived, but 2 calves and an adult died. Meanwhile, almost every other marine mammal in BC waters is thriving. Harbour seals, sea lions, humpbacks, and the Bigg's transient killer whales. So why are the animals that we revere the most struggling the most? Here to explain, the Vancouver Aquarium's Director of Animal Health and an adjunct professor with UBC's Marine Mammal Research Unit, Dr. Martin Haulena. Dr. Haulena, thanks so much for being here tonight.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Before we get started, I really want to delineate what we mean when we talk about the southern resident orcas. So I know there's transient orcas, there's northern resident orcas, and then there's the southern one. So what's the differences here?
So we call it, they're all the same species in general, but they're different ecotypes, which means that they've kind of evolved different behaviors to take advantage of the environment to the best of their ability, not to compete with others of a similar sort of whale. So the residents in general tend to be fish-eating killer whales, very social. We call them residents, but they're actually not that resident. They travel.
They don't stay in those areas.
For
okay.
a big chunk of the year, they travel through California into Monterey Bay, up and down the coast. But they are definitely around here, certainly through the spring and summer. So it's generally fish eaters. And then we divide those further into northern and southern. And that's a sort of population-based designation. They don't really mix. They kind of come into contact with each other, but they don't really mix that much. And then we've got these transient whales, or the Bigg whales. And those are those kind of, the reason they call them killer whales, right? The big, dramatic kind of marine mammal eating, porpoise and harbor seal and sea lion, sometimes even a sea otter eating, group hunting, big, slightly bigger, more robust killer whales. And we've got another ecotype just offshore. We call them the offshore killer whales, which are mostly like shark eaters. They eat elasmobranch sharks and skates, and so they're a whole different type of ecotype. So it's very, very interesting.
So what's going on with the southern resident orcas, where marine mammal life all around them is flourishing, but they seem to be struggling? Their population seems to be in a bit of a decline.
They really are, and it's really hard to pinpoint the cause, right? So in contrast to northern residents, very similar type of whale, very similar lifestyle, very similar prey items. They're fish eaters, salmon eaters, predominantly Chinook salmon eaters, are doing quite well. And even expanding their range to a certain extent. So they're coming from the north. These are, even though we call them residents again, these guys travel way up north through Alaska and then come down. They seem to be doing well. So what's limiting the population from expanding in southern residents? So very good question. In fact, coincidentally, there's a big workshop over the next 3 days, sponsored by DFO, bringing in killer whale experts, including us, together to look at what we can diagnose from these whales using remote sensory kind of sampling devices, sampling blow, and seeing what can we actually analyze from those animals to figure out their health. They're just not bouncing back, right? They have. It
sounds like we don't know. From what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Long story short, we don't know, but we've got some factors that we consider strong risk factors: food supply, anthropogenic noise, shipping noise, and contaminants. So anthropogenic, human-produced contaminants.
When we talk about food supply, they only eat salmon, right? So is that part of the issue, that it's not enough salmon? Absolutely part of the issue.
And has that got to do with the way we've dammed things, the river flow, agriculture, our own overfishing? Is this having to do with how salmon are moving? Are they just unlucky in areas where salmon are not thriving, whereas other areas they are thriving? Yeah, that's a potential. This might sound like a silly question, but why can't the southern resident orcas just eat something else? There's all this other marine life. Those transient Bigg orcas eat seals and sea lions. Why can't they just switch their diet? It's not that stupid a question. They are so similar, right? Why don't they? And I think it's well, again, we probably don't know. No one's asked a killer whale and they haven't told us back. But, you know, I think they've just evolved for so many years. They depend on learning from a matriarchal kind of lineage, right? So moms and grandmas teach the offspring how to hunt, where to hunt, what to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So they learn these things, and maybe they're uncomfortable doing other things. Now, we think they're very, very strict, but they're probably a little bit more diverse than we think. They'll take other fish. They don't take a whole lot of marine mammals, but they will take other things. But in general, yeah, they're very reliant on particular salmon population.
So what is being done, or what can be done to help this population thrive like the other ones around them?
You know, we're down to, 72 whales.
Mm-hmm.
And it's getting to the point of every individual being an absolutely important animal in the population, particularly female. So we're getting to the point where veterinarians are very much involved, like myself, and trying to develop a way to create health records, kind of at the level of human health records. We know the individuals, we know who they're related to, we know what kinds of trouble they've gone to. So we're creating these databases. We're very interested in health assessments, like how can we learn how healthy an animal is? And there's techniques like photogrammetry, which is flying a drone over a whale at a very specific height with a very specific camera, taking very specific measurements that are then thrown into a model that, you know, comes up with a number that tells us how fit, how you know, in good condition or bad condition these animals are. And we use that for a lot of decision making. And then there's no appetite to actually get our hands onto a whale anymore, right? To assess a thing. So, and that's very frustrating from a veterinarian. If I want to find out what's wrong with you, I need to figure things out. I need to image. I need to take samples. I need to palpate.
So you're not going in there feeding it salmon and giving it medical treatments.
No one's
okay.
Well, not to say that's out of the question, and certainly with J50 a few years ago, that was something we were considering, was feeding salmon from a local indigenous group that had a fish farm that was very closely involved and you know, felt very akin to this particular animal, that wanted to provide medication to the animal via farm salmon that they would try and feed, but the whale just wouldn't take that fish.
Oh, interesting.
So it's been thought. We're out there.
It sounds like it's very frustrating because you're kind of watching this happen.
It is.
And there's not a lot that you can do.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's more and more. There's a really good group of smart people on both sides of the border that are really wanting to work together. So I will say the camaraderie, the teamwork out there is very, very strong. Everybody wants to do the right thing. But yeah, we're very limited. These are big animals. They are not here all the time. A lot of the trouble they get into is probably not here where we see them all the time. It's probably a little bit more remote through the coastlines of Oregon and California,
right,
and remote Washington. We don't get our hands on animals when they pass away very often. They tend to sink,
Sure.
and we can't sample and can't find out things. So in that sense, it's a little bit frustrating, but technology is getting there. And some of this drone stuff where we can capture blows from the animals, drive drones right through the blows, and then all the sort of high-end molecular stuff that can be done from that, which is what this workshop is about in the coming days. That gives me a lot of hope, quite honestly.
Okay, well, definitely wishing the southern resident orcas very well. Doctor, thanks so much for your time tonight.
Of course, thank you.
Folks, that was the Director of Animal Health for the Vancouver Aquarium, Dr. Martin Haulena. Now, after a little business, it's autumn. The leaves are falling, and there's something you should do, or I guess shouldn't do, in order to help our local bees and butterflies. Tamara Taggart will explain up next.